Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to tune into the Trend of Global Early Stage Investment panel. My name is Keen Chen. I'm the managing editor of TechNode. Today, we're very honored to have three veteran investors join us for this conversation. They are Oscar Ramos, general partner at SOSV and managing director at Orbit Startups.
Hi, Chin. Great to be here today. Great pleasure.
Great to have you, Oscar. And Bernard Moon, co-founder and partner of Spark Labs.
Hi, Ching. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure to have you, Bernard. And Jeff Chen, senior vice president of Plug and Play.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be back in Beyond 2022.
Awesome to have you back here. So, let's just get right into the conversation then. We all know this and the past year has been a challenge to a lot of businesses, perhaps more so for companies that are just starting up. So the first question I have is, what is the environment for startup fundraising right now? Are there any sectors and regions that are more attractive than others, and why? Yes, I'll start with you, Oscar. And
Sure.
everyone is welcome to chime in.
Well, I'll say that that is no secret that fundraising has not been easy during the last month. I mean, we've been some of the numbers in terms of investment hitting really the lowest in years or quarters. And that is an objective fact. But if I have to describe the situation in terms of fundraising for startups right now, I'll say the word is slow. I mean, we work very closely with a lot of our portfolio companies, and we work with companies really across the world. I mean, for Orbit Startups, we're based out of Shanghai, but we're investing globally across multiple parts of Asia, Africa, Europe, North America, Latin America. And the common pattern that we've seen is that the decision-making process for any investment is taking longer. Every investor is scrutinizing more all the decisions. I think a lot of investors, at the end of the day, we also have to report. Most of the investors, especially VCs, we have our own investors, our own limited partners that back us, and we need to explain, okay, what did we do, what we do, and potentially leave like a clear evaluation process. And those evaluation processes right now are probably more detailed than they used to be. So everything is taking more time than it used to take. Financial due diligence are becoming way more like a tough. A lot of investors, they're trying to understand better. There used to be a stronger focus on growth, a stronger focus on the basic, more qualitative elements of an investment. And right now, I think a lot of investors are trying to analyze, okay, how real is what this company have? How repeatable and scalable is this revenue? How solid is going to be this company, and how dependent they're going to be on capital? How far is break-even point in terms of investment? And if they reduce the pace of investment-driven growth, can they still be sustainable?
Right. Is there any kind of sectors and areas that you think that's kind of more recession-proof?
Well, I mean, in terms of sectors, at the end of the day, every time there's a change in the global economy, in whatever aspect that exists, there's winners and losers. So some type of recessions, for example, they will drive. I was talking yesterday with a couple of my portfolio companies that are growing really fast, and they're actually having oversubscribed rounds. And the common pattern for all of them is that they are a better, cheaper, faster solution in the enterprise space for existing mandatory needs or mandatory requirements that a lot of companies need to have. So one of the things that you need to look is, okay, am I a nice to have, or am I a must have for my customers? I'm assuming that I am a must have for my customers, because if you're a nice to have, especially for the enterprise and the B2B space, a lot of people is going to say, sorry, like maybe later. And probably for consumers, it's going to be similar. Families that need to evaluate their own, I mean, how they spend their resources, considering the global uncertainty, they are going to make that decision. And if you are a must-have type of service, I mean, how do you compare with the existing alternatives? Are you the price sensitivity is probably going to be more relevant, but also with certain aspects, like health. People will not compromise as much on health as they might compromise in other aspects. So in that case, can you also prove that you are not just cheaper but better or easier than the existing solution? And from that point of view, migration or your capacity to ease the path of changing is going to be important in that case. So we're seeing a lot of movement in terms of financial services. There's a lot of people, a lot of organizations where they see financial services as a foundation of a lot of organizations, thinking, okay, this is an area where we can improve. This is an area where we need to look at those details, where without any change in our business, we can reduce our expense or improve our profit. In terms of geography, I'll say that I mean, for us at Orbit Startups, we have a very strong exposure to emerging markets. Although we invest globally, it is true that Asia, Africa, and Latin America are areas where we're investing stronger. We were originally as Orbit Startups coming from China Accelerator, the first accelerator program ever launched in Asia. We take a lot of the Asia innovation coming from China, from India, from Indonesia, and now circulating. And we see in some of these markets less impact in terms of the fundraising environment, as we've seen in other markets. Like, for example, in the US, we've seen a very strong reduction, at least in the portfolio that we have exposure to. This is something that is actually an exception. Anything that is climate tech or carbon reduction related, it's actually the opposite. We haven't seen any change there. Actually, there's a lot of growing appetite in that area. And then Europe has also been very, very slow. I'm right now in Spain, in Europe, and connecting a bit more with the local investment ecosystem. And I've seen also across Europe a very strong reduction in terms of the activity. So I'll say emerging markets are still, I mean, traditionally they've been different in terms of the pace of investment and activity of investment, but we're seeing less reduction compared to what we've seen in other more established markets.
Sounds good. Yeah, financial services, climate tech, sustainability tech, and emerging markets. Cool. So yeah, similar set of questions. Bernard, would love to hear kind of what's your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, not to be redundant with what Oscar said, I would just add sort of like, this year, I think it was expected from a lot of people that saw the, similar cycles before, that this year, at least valuations are reasonable, especially at the seed and Series A stage. I mean, across all stages, but especially, the updraft that was created by Tiger Global, Maverick, and all these players last year. It created like outrageous valuations at the seed, especially, here in Silicon Valley, where I'm based, where companies that typically would be like 8 to 15 million pre, especially if they're from, the YC class, it would be like 20 to 50 million post money. And unfortunately, we did do a couple of those deals, but it was just sort of like outrageous. We knew that, there would be adjustments this year. And then we were just concerned if it was a small seed raise, which we didn't participate in those, if it was like 2 million, even on like a post of 25 or 30, they would have a real hard time once there's a downturn and there's adjustment in the rounds. So at least sort of, rationality is sort of back this year. So I think that's good, for investors, but also for entrepreneurs, right? And for them to also see this cycle and just realize it's not always about, the highest valuation. It's really about executing with what you have and also hitting your next sort of benchmarks and goals. So.
Right. So more reasonable valuation this year. Do you see any kind of opportunities in this kind of adjustment period?
Well, I think it weeds out some of like the either certain types of entrepreneurs that might have been just going for like a quick money grab, I think it also filters out any bad actors in certain spaces like crypto, right? So I think it's a good thing for the overall ecosystem to go through this period of adjustment for also for first time entrepreneurs to sort of see the cycle. So I think it's been a good year overall.
Yeah, healthy adjustment period. Cool. So Jeff, I want to turn the table to you and would love to hear what you think on that.
So despite all the negativities that we've been hearing in our industry last year, I would say 2021 was a very solid year for a lot of funds, especially ones in Silicon Valley, right? I think a lot of startups, especially one that are kind of taking advantage of COVID, saw everything moving on virtually. They're doing really well. And then last year was also a very, very solid year for a lot of the venture capital firms. But I think just piggyback right on what was shared a little bit earlier, this year's been definitely been very, very tough. Been hearing across the board, startups are becoming more and more conservatives, as with investors. In terms of the opportunity or areas of growth that you mentioned, I think one thing that we've been seeing is the domestication of product, right? I think, especially with some of the heightened political instability, I'll put it that way. We've been seeing a lot of growth in that, a lot, as you know, plug and play, we work with a lot of Fortune 500 in terms of innovation, introducing startups to them. And we've been noticing that they've been requesting these type of startup from us, is that, the Siemens of the world, for example, in China, they'll kind of purchase the equipments, but then in terms of the software that operates it, they're now looking for something that's domestic, right? As opposed to just looking for the best available technology. So that area, we've been seeing some trends. Cybersecurity, we're also starting to see a bit of a comeback in that area as people start to pay more attention to that. Carbon neutrality has always been, solid. So these are some of the areas that we've been seeing some growth. And I was just in Silicon Valley last month, and then a startup that we invested into is something that wouldn't be as sexy, I would say, 2 or 3 years ago, but it's actually very, very solid right now. It's I can say it's just also like a Chinese version of Turing, if that would be a good idea. So it's basically like an HR software, outsourcing global needs to, cheaper, more efficient talents globally. This is something that wouldn't really get everybody's interest, I would say 2 or 3 years ago, but right now, with a more conservative investment mindset, and then COVID, everything turning virtual, these are some really solid investment that we've been seeing actually.
Yeah, right. So kind of more domestication of different kind of offerings, cybersecurity, carbon neutral. Great. So since we're having you here, I'm gonna kind of switch the order a bit. And I'll pose the next question, starting with you, Jeff. So, we've been hearing a lot from all of you guys that we're in this kind of adjustment period. And as we're finishing off the rest of this year and heading to the next one, we're probably going to see a period of continuation of this adjustment in many regions. And some might even face kind of the threat of recessions. So we would be curious to know, what is your investment strategy for the next 2 years? And how long do you think we're going to be out of this adjustment period?
Sure. In terms of the overall strategy, what I would say is that my team and I have been focusing a lot more on not just the founding team of a startup, but also just really digging into their business model, which is something that we don't do as frequently, because we typically invest in about 250 startups a year. So that's a lot of DDs to do, obviously. But then I think one of the speakers, I think Oscar mentioned a little bit earlier. Now we are not just talking to the founders, seeing if they have a solid background. It's really about whether they're really they're really taking care of some real pain points. So I've been asking my team to pay a lot more attention, just doing a lot more due diligence. And this is something that we don't typically do. For early stage startup, 100K check sizes, it's really about, if they have a solid background, they have strong traction. So I think people just be in the VC world, we're just going to be more and more cautious, and then we have to make sure that there's actual strong application as opposed to just a very sexy idea or whatnot going forward. So that's part one of your question. Part two, in terms of the adjustment period, I typically would not like to put an actual length, whether that's 18 months or 20 months. To me, it's more about an adjustment period, right? And then it really comes down to the vertical, the industry, and the region. So I wouldn't say that we're out of the woods in 1 year. It's really about us making an adjustment, from investor or startups, right? So I think really, it really varies from that point of view. At least from my firm's point of view, where we're mostly focusing on the needs of corporate partners. So the startup we've been looking at are mostly 2B startups. It has really been about cross-vertical support. That has been kind of the focuses for a lot of our corporation. They're looking for potential growth outside of their industry, in a sense. So that's why what we've been seeing a lot, especially from the financial industry. Banks are really looking at startups from all different sectors, which we think is a very interesting trend.
Yeah, just want to know a little bit more what kind of other sectors that banks are trying to get into.
Okay. So for example, two of our biggest partners, one is Pufa Inham, right? So I think that's Pudong Development Bank. So they've started at InHub with us and Plug and Play. And then surprisingly, they're not targeting particularly on fintech startups. They're looking at, fintech plus, right? So fintech plus retail, fintechs plus health. And then so they're really looking at how they can leverage their client base and using their technology to expand to other industry. And then the ones that are looking at fintech right now, surprisingly, are the OEMs in tier one. We see the big car makers. Now they're looking at fintech, and they're looking at health application. So all these things are something that starting to become more mainstream post, I would say, 2019 and 20, is that we're getting requests from corporations that are basically out of their typical comfort zone.
Very interesting. So yeah, more careful due diligence and cross-sector projects. Right. Bernard.
I'm sorry, could you restate the question again?
Yeah, for sure. Just what is your investment strategy for the rest of the year and kind of the next 2 years? And how long do you think we're going to be out of this adjustment period?
Well, markets are hard to predict, right? Even on a personal level, on the equity side, it's like, when is bottom? Well, it looks like bottom now, right? So I think the only thing we could do is, obviously give advice to our founders in terms of just focus on execution, be a little more conservative during this time, right? And just ride out and see, when the bottom is. I mean, hopefully it's year end and things will pick up, next year, but, we'll see. In terms of investment strategy and our process, it hasn't changed that much. I think we're just more strict on valuations now, right? I mean, I think we've, even though we're a young firm, like 9 years in, we still had a pretty standard process in terms of our due diligence and the way that we made investment decisions. The only thing is that I would say we got, sucked into some of the craziness of last year, right? So we're not going for any crazy high valuations, and some of the founders, surprisingly, even September of this year, they still didn't get the memo that they can't go for these high valuations. So, me or one of my partners has to tell them, I don't think that's realistic. So that's probably the one thing that's probably changed in our process, is walking away from some of the crazy valuations.
Right. So yeah, be more careful on valuations and and ask founders to focus on executions and riding the wave out.
Yep.
Great. Oscar.
Well, I mean, for us, kind of aligned with what Bernard was saying, we are not, in general, we don't, we have a very consistent investment strategy constantly in the way we invest. So we keep our pace of investment, working with companies, because our model of investment, it is somehow quite recession proof. So we always back companies that have core fundamentals, that they are solving real pain points, that are working in a way where there's some level of confirmation that the value that they create for the users receives a compensation. So our companies tend to get to a unique positive economics relatively fast, and they can potentially not just be dependent on external capital to survive, but they do leverage external capital to grow. So from that point of view, that's going to be relatively similar in terms of our investment. I think that what probably are going to see right now is that companies are going to start to work on thinking internally what should be their strategy. So right now we're going to be doing a number of I think it's going to be at least a year, maybe a bit less, maybe more, we don't know, but I think a year is a good time to plan as a benchmark, where cost of capital is going to be very high. And that's obviously going to create difficulty for those companies that require capital to survive and to be able to operate. But on the other side, cost of infrastructure and cost of growth is going to be cheaper. So there's going to be more talent available. The talent available is not going to have the same level of expectations. The challenge here is going to be that some of the talent that traditionally that in the past, during the good old years where money was flooding into the startup world, they were more comfortable joining startups. Right now, they might be a bit more conservative, and then in that case, they might prefer to just join a more established firm instead of trying to take a role in startup. Although personally, I think this is actually the best time. If you pick the right winners, this is actually the time where a lot of good companies are going to be created. No, we've seen that pattern over and over, where any time where things are slow and the cost of opportunity to launch a company and the established players are more open to change, because no change is a risk. When everything is going well and there's no issue, change is a risk. So it works, don't change it. But if things are not going as expected, then you have to change. So I think from that point of view, that's going to be very important. I mean, one of the key value propositions we bring to our companies is free customer acquisition and free customer development to secure customers. And these particularly for consumer startups, this represents close to 60% of the venture capital that is raised. So if you remove the need to have all of these access, the need to have all of these budget for customer acquisition, and the remaining budget, which is used mostly for team, for product development, this is somehow lower because the market cost is also lower. That creates a very good opportunity for capital efficient companies. So that's why we will not adjust, at least will not adjust our strategy dramatically. We'll continue very, very consistently. We might adjust the way we work with the companies, because now more companies will probably be more interested in leveraging some of these channels for free customer acquisition that we offer to companies.
Great. So sounds like you're keeping a consistent investment strategy focused on those companies that give society real values, and also seeing opportunities in kind of financial structures and makeups within companies during this time.
Yep.
Great.
I'll say that it might be a bit more difficult for companies that have a long time to market. So especially some of the deep tech companies, in that case, could potentially be a bit more difficult. But then deep tech companies, sometimes they work in areas that might run differently from more like business driven type of or short-term business-driven investment. No, we're talking earlier about how or climate tech companies are actually having a good time, and there's a lot of investment. A lot of those companies are actually deep tech companies that are leveraging science to solve some of the biggest challenges that humanity has.
Right. And you're saying that you're seeing still just persistent investment opportunities for those companies, right?
Yeah, I mean, actually, this is a global trend where there's a lot of activity, and there I think that creates also other areas that are adjacent where there's also a lot of activity.
Right. Right. So Bernard, I'll start the next question with you. And the next question is, what is your suggestion to startups that are looking for funding right now, if they haven't secured enough money before this adjustment period?
Well, I mean, it's hard to sort of generalize. I mean, it depends on the space they're in, but I would generally say, just be persistent. I think during this environment, it just takes, probably like twice as many asks and pitches, etc. Right. So if you, a year ago or so, maybe it took 50 meetings or 50 to 100 pitches, maybe it'll take 200. So I think just be persistent, but also, it's like basic things like know the investors that you're targeting, what they're really looking for. And if that firm has even adjusted their strategy, some have, some haven't. I remember even like last year, some of the established Silicon Valley firms, such as Sequoia, they would turn away these crazy valuations at the seed deal. They'd be like, "Are you guys crazy?" They actually told that to one of our startups that we invested in, right? So some people, they've made the adjustment, and so they should definitely do their homework on this.
Right. Do you have any examples? I mean, you don't have to give specific names, but just maybe like specific sectors or kind of just more examples to illustrate that point.
In terms of what people are looking for or shying away from. I mean, obviously it's, the interest overall in crypto, let's say, has gone down, right? But also some of these businesses that thrived during COVID also are less interesting, right? Whether it's like Peloton type businesses or certain delivery or things that were more stay-at-home oriented, there's obviously been adjustment. Even just general trends, like people assume that, there would be sort of a continued, enthusiasm towards, work at home and not going to conferences and traveling. But, I think in the US and a lot of locations, people are dying to go and travel and meet people in person, right? So these are all things that are sort of swinging back.
Sounds good. Oscar, I'll come back to you with the same question, kind of suggestions to startups.
Well, I'll say 3 things that I believe startups need to work on if they wanna like try to fundraise during this time. The first thing would be adjust. You need to adjust your cost structure, your financials. You need to plan on that. And when you finish that, adjust again. And when you finish that, ask somebody to help you adjust. So you need to show capital efficiency. You need to increase a runway. So right now, investors wants to make sure that whatever they invest, it's going to something that has a purpose. So I think that's the first thing that is very important. Okay. Second thing is make the investor work easy. So investors are taking long because they have to analyze more. So make sure that you share information in a clear, organized way. So giving me a data room with 1 million documents, 3 gigas of data is not helping me if most of this information is irrelevant. So make sure that the information that you provide is simple, but not oversimplistic, is well organized, and is clear. That is very important. And the third thing, and kind of like building on what Bernard said, you need to make sure that you have patience and you understand that this is a process, and that this process is going to take time. So you need to understand who are the investors that you're talking with, what is the activity that they had, try to understand when is the last deal that they made, what are the criteria that they have right now, try to compare what they tell you and what you're able to see in terms of the activity that you can track. If you have existing investors and those existing investors have some intel from the market, try to work together with them. I was checking yesterday with a few of the portfolio companies, and I was like, well, work with your investors, share with them the data, be consistent, be transparent, and make it easy for people to make decisions. I think that applies every single time for investment, but right now this is even more relevant than ever. Because whatever is if nobody likes fundraising. I mean, personally, even when I was an entrepreneur in my own company, the part that I liked the least of everything was fundraising. I like building my product. I like working with my team, but having to go through a lot of rejection, a lot of conversations with investors and repeating the same story over and over again is not the most motivational part of being an entrepreneur. But there's a necessary step to be able to build your company. So Jeff, you guys work a lot with enterprises, and one of the things that we normally see is a very specific and different behavior between corporate VCs and regular VCs. What are the trends that you're seeing right now in terms of corporate VC activity that might be different from the regular VCs?
A lot more conservative now, especially me. I'm currently based in China, but then previously I was based in the States. A lot of our corporate partners from China, they were being very adventuresome with some of their investment, with their appetite. They're looking at really earlier stage startups globally just to get a sense of the trend. So I feel like they can probably afford to do that in 1920. But then since COVID, they've kind of pivoted. Their focus is back to their home region, their domestic region. And then they're starting to asking up for more mature startup, Series A or after, where they can see some strong application. So that's something that we have been seeing noticeably post-COVID.
Yeah, we always see like a kind of a reduction of activity in terms of corporate VCs when the core business needs to be the priority, because at the end of the day, for regular VCs or investment activity is our core activity, but for corporate VCs, that's kind of like an extra thing. Is that corporate VC has grown significantly over the last 2-3 years, and I wonder, well, there's a moment where corporate VC itself starts having a different and separate behavior, no? And I do think I've seen some funds that I don't see a particular change, like a lot of the companies that former portfolio companies that are closing rounds, they actually have more corporate VCs working, but that's I guess that across the board the behavior at the end is the same behavior, no, for the whole group. And if I can ask another question maybe to Bernard. So Bernard, you're based in Silicon Valley, but Spark Labs, you guys have a very strong Asian, Korean DNA in what you do. How are you seeing right now? And you were talking a lot about valuations and valuations in the Valley being really high, whereas in other parts of the world we don't have that type of high valuations. What are you seeing in terms of are you seeing a more interest in Silicon Valley funds looking at other geographies based on lower cost, lower valuations, or you think that this recession is actually closing things a bit more?
Well, in Korea, there's still some of the high valuations. It's wherever SoftBank and Tiger Global go, and they're investing across the globe. But I think for Silicon Valley firms, yeah, I think if they already invested overseas or in certain markets, I think they just continue that again with just more of a reasonable approach. So I don't think it's this sudden sort of sort of movement outside of the US or Silicon Valley. But I think it's just a general trend anyways that occurred before the, the craziness of the past couple of years. I mean, the bellwether is obviously always Y Combinator, right? And every year they've slowly increased their international intake of foreign companies in their portfolio. So you've seen that increase from like 30% to 35% to 40 to 50% every batch. And so I think that's just a good signal for, I think, all of us here and other investors that invest in multiple geographies, is that the world is getting flatter. Entrepreneurs are getting stronger across the board. And there's obviously a leveling playing field too. So I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, we're seeing, we were, before this kind of like situation kind of started to be more clear, I think a few months ago. And we're actually surprised and gladly seeing a lot of investors from the Valley like venturing into some of the markets that we were active. So we were able to see some of the most iconic venture capital or angel investors from the Valley investing in our companies in Pakistan, or taking first investments in India or Nigeria or some other markets. And we don't know exactly if this is something that this change is something that will accelerate that trend or will potentially slow it down. We're still not clear on that. We don't have enough evidence to be able to say, well, this seems to be the trend.
Yeah, I think it's sort of a wait and see. I mean, for us, like we did actually, in the past 2 months, we did 2 recent fintech investments in Pakistan. Right. So I think people are looking at more emerging markets. You sort of do have to place your bets as everything develops. So.
Great. So kind of just closing up our conversation, kind of wanted to pose a kind of future-looking question. What kind of a predominant trends of the early stage investment you guys are seeing, maybe kind of a few years from now? Oscar, I'll start with you.
Well, I'm trying to understand the question, see how to
just kind of emergent trends that you're seeing that kind of just bubbling up, that you think that are just taking shape.
Well, I think at least for us, one of the trends that we're more excited about is actually is one of the pillars of our investment thesis in Orbit, which is right now we're seeing technology as a force of improvement of quality of life in emerging markets. Some of the goals that society has to be able to reach level of stability and well-being, they can only be achieved with the use of technology. We're only going to be able to provide education and health and proper access to food and healthy like entertainment if technology becomes relevant. And I think that's going to be a major trend that's going to be very, very relevant. And we're going to see not only those businesses and that technology be very relevant for the situation of emerging markets, but what we're starting to see as an initial trend is that those solutions that are very efficient in terms of cost, very effective in terms of solutions, and sometimes either like very, very simple to be able to be quite inclusive and require low barriers of entry in terms of knowledge or technology literacy to be able to use them. Those solutions are eventually going to be able to make a jump and become solutions that are also going to be quite relevant and quite competitive in more developed economies, where at the end of the day, we're seeing, for example, a case right now of a company providing a solution in the insurtech space, that addresses the issue that policy management, the cost of policy management, sometimes makes certain insurance services not viable in emerging markets where the premium is very low. And then if the cost of the premium is lower, but the cost of management of the policy is too high, the premium the service cannot be delivered. So you need to have a more cost-effective solution. Once you have this type of cost-effective solution that works and is compliant and meets all the requirements in terms of quality, security, safety, etc., at that cost, that solution is also a solution that could work in a more developed economy. We're seeing already that with some of the portfolio companies. So I think that trend is an emerging trend where we'll see new hubs of innovation that will shape the future. And we're very, very excited about that. And we're really looking forward to bring more innovation from the rest of the world. Sometimes it's called to the more larger ecosystems.
Right. So tech solutions that improve the quality of life that are taking shape in emerging markets and might spread all across the world. Great. Bernard?
Yeah, I think just general sort of trends that, we sort of see are more innovation on the enterprise software side, especially in even top OECD nations, besides the US, UK, and certain markets. I think that's developing further in Asia, right? Whether it's China, Korea, Japan, I think it'll continue, and also sort of second tier OECD nations. Crypto infrastructure plays, I think that's going to grow. It's a space that we're watching. Also, just overall healthcare innovations, I think that's going to continue. It was a trend obviously in COVID, but I think that'll it's just further accelerated, whether it's on the biotech side to even just on the software and other innovations.
Right. Jeff?
So I think instead of proposing a particular sector or industry, I will just kind of reemphasize on the domestication of product and services. So what we've seen right now, I would say 3 years ago, when you find something really good in the States, you'll say, well, can I potentially bring that to China? Vice versa. Now the mindset has become, well, I see a very good idea for a explosive startup over here in this part of the world. Can I do something similar in that part of the world, given the policy, some of the political sensitivity and whatnot? So that's what we've been very intrigued to see. And then startups take a lot of pride just saying that I'm this version of that in this particular part of the world, knowing that there's actually a higher barrier since COVID because of some of the political environment that we've spoken of. So I think that has also been a developing trend. I think that which will probably continue to the next 2, 4, even 6 years.
Great. So it's a good idea, regional idea that are taking shapes in different parts of the world. Great. I think that would be all for our conversations today. Really appreciate all of you guys making the time to give us all those insights. We benefit greatly from them, and thank you so much for sharing those wisdom with us.
Anytime.
Thanks for moderating.
Thank you very much for the invitation to Chan.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Pleasure talking to you.